You're listening to Krimtime, a YouTube channel and podcast that focuses on cases involving serial killers. All of our cases are available in both Swedish and English. This recording may contain descriptions of violent crimes and should be approached with caution. If you feel discomfort regarding crime-related content, we advise you not to continue watching this video.
In the quiet British coastal town of Eastbourne, Sussex, during the mid-20th century, a disturbing rumor circulated. It concerned a doctor who seemed to have a macabre habit of surrounding himself with dying wealthy women, patients who, after their final breath, often left a portion of their inheritance to him. The doctor was Dr. John Bodkin Adams, and for several years he was the subject of one of the most fascinating, terrifying, and controversial investigations in British legal history. John Bodkin Adams was born on January 21, 1899, in the small town of Randalstown in Northern Ireland. He grew up in a deeply religious household and belonged to a Protestant sect, the Plymouth Brethren, a conservative and reclusive group whose members often lived apart from society. His life was shaped by this strict religious structure and belief in predestination. At 17, he began studying medicine at Queen's University, Belfast. He was not particularly social and was described as a loner, a trait reinforced by missing an entire year of studies due to illness, possibly tuberculosis. In 1921, he earned his medical degree and began working at Bristol Royal Infirmary, but after just 1 year he left. It was the start of a new phase in his life, a move to Eastbourne to work as a private general practitioner. Eastbourne attracted older, affluent retirees. There, Adams found his niche. He worked tirelessly as a GP and quickly became known as a warm, compassionate, and devoted doctor, especially among elderly women who found comfort in his care. But behind the friendly smile lurked something far darker. Adams had an unusually keen interest in his patients' financial affairs. He was always dressed in his characteristic suit, spoke softly, and exuded a calm that appealed to patients approaching the end of life. He often made home visits, sometimes several times a day, and nurses testified that he preferred to be alone in patients' bedrooms. It was there many patients received their final doses of morphine, heroin, barbiturates, and other sedatives. Between 1935 and 1956, over 160 of his patients died under highly suspicious circumstances. Many left him large sums of money, jewelry, furniture, and even luxury cars in their wills. In at least 132 cases where the cause of death was unclear, Adams was named as heir. One of the most frequently discussed patients was Edith Alice Morell, a wealthy widow who had a stroke in 1949. She moved to Eastbourne for specialist care and came under Adams's treatment. She was paralyzed and in severe pain, primarily due to arthritis and a cerebral thrombosis. Adams treated her suffering with regular doses of morphine and heroin. Nurses testified that the doses were unreasonable, especially when the patient sometimes seemed to improve. In November 1949, she received a total of 2 624 milligrams morphine and 2 527 milligrams heroin, levels that would normally be fatal, even for someone with high tolerance. Despite having recently amended her will to specifically exclude Adams, he still received money and a Rolls-Royce. The cause of death was listed as a stroke, and he avoided an autopsy by denying any financial interest in her death on the cremation form, a direct lie. Another suspicious case occurred 7 years later. Gertrude Hullett, a wealthy 50-year-old, became ill after being prescribed sodium barbitone and sodium phenobarbital. Adams contacted local pathologist Francis Camps to arrange an autopsy before she had even died. Camps found double the lethal dose of barbiturates in her urine. Unlike Morell, Hullett had been relatively healthy before her sudden decline. Nurses reported Adams prescribed strong sleeping pills several times a day, yet her death certificate cited cerebral hemorrhage. Camps concluded it was poisoning. Again, Adams received valuable bequests, including another Rolls-Royce. This triggered a police hunt leading to trial. There were even more suspicious deaths and approximate conversions. Agnes Pike became a patient of Dr. Adams in August 1939. She was staying at a hotel when she began experiencing severe drowsiness, confusion, and strange mental symptoms, at one point believing she was 200 years old. These symptoms were reportedly brought on by the administration of hypnotic drugs prescribed by Adams. Concerned by her deteriorating condition, her legal representatives contacted another physician, Dr. Matthew, who examined her alongside Adams. Dr. Matthew found no significant underlying illness and concluded that her condition was drug-induced. Adams suddenly administered a morphine injection during the consultation, claiming it was necessary in case she became violent. He also restricted her from receiving visitors. After Adams withdrew from the case, Agnes made a surprisingly quick recovery within 8 weeks, resuming everyday activities such as shopping. The case raised serious questions about Adams's medical judgment and motives. Amy Ware died under Adams's care on February 23, 1950. During her final days, she was isolated from her family. No one was allowed to visit her, a recurring pattern in Adams's cases. She had named Adams in her will, leaving him approximately £1,000. However, on her cremation form, Adams falsely claimed he had no financial interest in her death. This act of deliberate misinformation led to one of the charges for which he was convicted in 1957. The falsification of cremation documents became one of the key pieces of evidence demonstrating a pattern of deceit tied to financial gain. Annabelle Kilgore was under Adams's care for several months before she fell into a coma and died on December 23, 1950. She had suffered a stroke earlier that year, and Adams had prescribed her sedatives, including morphine. A nurse involved in her care testified to the police that she believed Adams had administered either an incorrect injection or an excessively strong dose. Prior to her death, Adams had discussed her will with her and was later found to have received approximately £190 and a valuable wristwatch from her estate. Her sudden decline, coupled with the nature of the inheritance and the nurse's concerns, added to the growing suspicions surrounding Adams's medical practices. Julia Bradnam was described as active and lucid the day before her death in 1952. Despite her age, she performed household chores and even went for a walk. Adams, who had frequently visited her, had earlier inquired about her will and offered to accompany her to the bank. He allegedly suggested that she sell her house and split the proceeds rather than bequeathing it directly. After her death, following a sudden illness, Adams received about £650 from her estate. A nurse reported seeing him often hold Julia's hand and kneel beside her, appearing unusually involved. After her body was exhumed in 1956, forensic pathologist Dr. Francis Camps disputed the stated cause of death, further implicating Adams in suspicious conduct. Julia Thomas had become depressed following the death of her cat. Adams responded by prescribing sedatives. On 20 November, she fell into a coma. The next day, Adams casually informed the housekeeper, "Mrs. Thomas has promised me her typewriter. I'll take it now." She died early the following morning at 3 a.m. The combination of his anticipation of her death, the sedatives administered, and his immediate collection of her belongings added to the portrait of a doctor more interested in inheritance than healing. Hilda Neal Miller died at a boarding house where she lived with her sister Clara. Adams spoke to a friend of the sisters using confusing medical jargon and was seen by a nurse removing items from Hilda's room and putting them in his pockets. He also took responsibility for arranging the funeral. Clara, who was also under Adams's care, frequently had her door locked during his visits. She reportedly told others that Adams helped her with very personal matters. In her will, she left him £1,270, and he managed to extract an additional £700 from her estate. One nurse reported finding Clara naked in bed with the blankets pulled down and the window wide open in winter, while Adams sat nearby reading the Bible, a chilling image that underscored the imbalance of power and control he exercised over his elderly patients. James Downs, brother-in-law of Amy Ware, was being treated by Adams for a broken leg. During his treatment, Adams administered morphine and allegedly helped him rewrite his will. Downs fell into a coma and died. After 36 hours, Adams received approximately £1,000 from the estate. As with Amy Ware, Adams signed the cremation form, falsely stating he had no financial interest in the patient's death. These repeated instances of forgery and financial gain highlighted a pattern of behavior that ultimately led to Adams's conviction on multiple charges. Hullett's husband. After the death of Gertrude Hullett's husband, Adams went to a pharmacy and collected morphine using a backdated prescription. Police later speculated that this was an attempt to cover for previous unauthorized use of morphine from his own private supply. He received around £500 from Mr. Hullett's will. The preemptive nature of his actions and the financial reward deepened suspicions that Adams was manipulating both medical records and legal documents to his advantage. Nurse testimonies were central at trial. 4 nurses who cared for Morell independently reported he administered extremely high doses of morphine and heroin. One nurse said, "The woman wants to die and we must help her," suggesting Adams may have seen himself as more than a doctor, perhaps as a life ender. After months of investigation, Adams was arrested and tried in 1957, charged with murder. With no bodies, most had been cremated. The prosecution relied on nurse testimonies and drug records. His defense lawyer, Sir Frederick Geoffrey Lawrence, challenged the nurses' credibility using their own diaries. demonstrating that the medication was within palliative care norms. The concept of double effect, that pain relief may hasten death, is debated in ethical contexts. The jury deliberated for only 45 minutes before acquitting him. Adams resigned from the NHS and was convicted of 8 counts of forging prescriptions, 4 counts of false information on cremation forms, minus 3 breaches of the Dangerous Drugs Act. He was fined approximately £2.300 plus court costs. Struck off the medical register on November 22, 1957, he sold his story to the Daily Express for £10,000 and won defamation suits against several newspapers. Despite public suspicion, he reopened his practice in 1961. His colleagues evidently saw no impropriety. He also applied for a U.S. visa, and it was denied. He later became honorary physician and chairman of the British Clay Pigeon Shooting Association. On June 30, 1983, he fell while shooting in Battle, Sussex, broke his hip, developed pneumonia in hospital, and died on 4 July of left ventricular failure. He left an estate of about £400,000 and had continued to receive testamentary gifts until the end. John Bodkin Adams was never convicted of murder, but his actions blur the line between care, ethics, and greed. His case remains a unique intersection of law, medicine, and morality. The question endures, was he a merciful angel in white, or a cold-blooded serial killer exploiting his position?
What do you think about the case you just listened to? If you're interested in more, feel free to check out our other crime stories. You're always welcome to send us tips on new cases. We'll consider them for future episodes. We hope you enjoyed listening, and don't forget to share Krimtime with others who enjoy this type of podcast.